Hi guys, it's Shadow. Uploading high-quality audiobooks for you, it's very time-consuming and hard-working process. So please support me so I can keep uploading for you. This is how. You can donate directly through my PayPal or Ko-fi. You will find links in the description. Or you can join our Telegram channel where you will find all paid audiobooks that we provide. Also, you can make requests and you will find proof of payments from our plus 200 paid members. If you can't support me financially, just like and subscribe our videos. Thank you guys, your support means a lot. And as always, enjoy Shadow. Chapter 61. An older brother. Chapter 61. An older brother. An older brother. I want to eat meat, not the chewy, tough beasts like those in North Sweden, but something tender. You've got quite a few orders. What's the big deal about this? Do you know how picky noble young ladies of my age are? I'm the Amazon of North Sweden, so I should at least be able to eat this much. Dia, who strangely took pride in living in the cold north, confidently stuck out her chest. Naturally, I didn't understand the sentiments, so I just shook my head and walked down the street, ignoring her. Grey Pond was definitely a big, bustling city. Although Loburn, where Loburn Academy was located, was also a fairly large city, when compared to Grey Pond, it seemed somewhat inferior. The hustle and bustle was filled with the disorderly footsteps of people, the rolling sound of carriage wheels, and the nerve-wracking haggling among merchants. While it was white noise that could be heard anywhere, when there is too much it would become irritating. Although I wished to walk faster, Dia quickly turned her head around with her mouth agape in astonishment. Having lived in the borderlands like North Sweden her entire life, until the age of 24, this sight must have been full of wonders for her. With a regretful sigh, she tilted her head and came to my side with quick, short steps, matching my pace while giggling. I think I picked the wrong place to be born. Turns out I'm actually a city girl, it's in my nature. I like everything here, even the air. It hasn't even been 10 minutes since we came downtown. Isn't that why my statement is even truer? It feels like recognizing your soulmate? Where did the Amazon from North Sweden go? People evolve. I can feel that my body is happy to live and breathe here. After seeing Dia reach out her hands and take a deep breath through her nose, my eyes narrowed, subtly expressing that I found her actions to be somewhat pathetic. You've been living as an old maid until now, at 24 years of age. How do you know the feeling of meeting your soulmate? This basta. She bit her lips, clenched her fist, and glared at me. Then, as if releasing tension, she exhaled and responded. Phew. You see, I have a bit of trauma, so I just didn't want to find one. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Feeling like I indulged in my younger sister's temper, I apologized, acknowledging that I spoke recklessly. The reason she developed this type of hatred towards others was precisely because of Deus. After looking at me apologizing, Dia shook her hand. It's fine. It's not like you really are that bastard. After that exchange, we became silent. There was no longer conversation between us. Come to think of it, this was how the usual Deus and Dia interacted. The big city, Grey Pond, briefly transformed Dia into a girl, but she soon had to face the harsh visages of reality. We arrived at the restaurant at the perfect time. We saw a friendly indication that Merson was open, and upon opening the door, we walked in. Welcome. Along with the energetic greeting from the waiter, the buzzing sounds of people's conversations filled the air. Seeing numerous customers, Dia glanced around with a slightly expectant expression, uttering, "Oh, is it just the two of you? I'll guide you to your table." The place the waiter led us to was quite a secluded spot. It seemed like they hastily cleaned the table, perhaps right after the previous customers finished eating and left. Here is the menu. Please call us when you decide on your order. The waiter handed over a menu that offered a wide array of choices. I took it and passed it to Dia first. You can take a look at it first. With a somewhat disapproving expression, Dia quickly snatched the menu after looking at me. However, she quickly became absorbed and started to contemplate what she should order. It's a roast beef, but it comes with cheese fondue? Wow, what's this? This one could be good with salad. It seems like it has a lot of asparagus. They're hosting an event where, if you order a set menu, they give you a keychain. Wow, that's something you can't even imagine seeing in North Sweden. I silently observed Dia, who was continuously studying the menu for almost 10 minutes and expressing enthusiasm about it on her own. After being engrossed for a while, Dia looked up from the menu and met my eyes. And feeling suddenly embarrassed, she quickly lowered her gaze. I want this one, the cheese fondue roast beef. Then let's order it as a set. It'll go with set B. Huh? After glancing at the menu, I promptly called the waiter and placed down our order. After adding a simple drink as well, I crossed my arms and stared at Dia. She still had a sullen expression as she looked at me. Aren't you choosing your meal too carelessly? You don't even know what's in set B. It doesn't matter. It's all the same after all. After that, silence once again settled between us. If it were my past life, I could at least use a phone to pass time. But it wasn't like there was nothing to see here. Perhaps because it was a big city, there were plenty of ghosts roaming around. Although they weren't malevolent enough to inflict harm, there were still many wandering spirits harboring resentment. Once the food arrived, the savory aroma stimulated my stomach through scent. Even in the game, this restaurant received rave reviews from the characters, so it was expected that the visuals were impressive from the start. Hey, race the keychain for the set. The waiter left the keychain with the food. I subtly pushed the keychain with a small bear doll attached towards Dia. Take it. I don't need it. I started quietly eating the accompanying salad. The taste wasn't bad at all, and it had shrimp inside. Watching me absent-mindedly enjoying my meal like that, Dia awkwardly accepted the keychain and put it in her pocket. You didn't intentionally order the set menu so I could get this, did you? No. Although I said that, Dia still looked at me suspiciously. She dipped the meat into the cheese fondue and began eating with a distracted mind. After finishing the meal, we stopped by a nearby cafe. I suggested going for a walk to digest our meal, but we opted to sit at the cafe since Dia wanted dessert. Wow, is this what Grey Pond is like? The meat was so juicy and incredibly delicious. As long as you enjoyed it. Perhaps her mind was elsewhere. She didn't realize that there was some food smudging her mouth. It bothered me a bit. You are different from usual. I rested my chin on one hand, and Dia, who was sipping on her coffee, flinched slightly and glanced at me. She might have wished not to talk about it, but I couldn't afford to waste time. Tomorrow I would have to face the king's final trial. So I wanted to be a little straightforward. Dia quietly responded, tapping the ice floating in her coffee with a straw. Can we just say that I'm like this because I was excited about Grey Pond? If that's what you want, then I shall take it that way. I had no intention of probing further if Dia didn't want to. I, too, sipped my coffee without saying a word. Dia lightly traced her fingers around her coffee cup before speaking with determination. Name. What was your original name? Upon hearing her question, I slowly took the coffee cup away from my mouth and calmly replied, Kim Shinwoo. Kim Shinwoo? Yes, it might sound strange here, but it was a common name where I lived. Kim Shinwoo. Dia repeated my name as if pondering it, before continuing with more questions. How old are you originally? Were you 28? I'm 25. Just a year apart. Still, you're older. It was a bit surprising. I didn't expect Dia to ask about me in such detail. Now that she started, she rode the flow and continued to pour out questions one after another, as if she was unpacking the words she had kept locked up. Were you a necromancer there too? No, it's similar. Being able to see ghosts isn't due to Deus' constitution but mine. I see. The conversation lasted longer than expected. When my throat grew sore from talking so much, I ordered more coffee and recharged our blood sugar with a sweet cake. Even then, Dia didn't stop asking her questions. Did you have a younger sibling? I'm an only child. Really? Did you get married then? I also never had a lover. Then why did you call me an old maid earlier? I didn't bother to answer. Although I never had a lover, it didn't mean I was unpopular, as there were often girls who confessed to me. They apparently found charm in someone who was quiet and reserved. However, being able to see ghosts made it difficult for me to accept such confessions lightly. Because if things went wrong, it could easily lead to accumulating grudges, especially in the case of lovers. Well, after a moment of endless questioning, Dia took a brief pause before speaking again. Is Deus inside you right now? For the first time, I couldn't immediately answer her question. Dia noticed my reaction. Her eyes didn't let me escape with a different answer. I too had no intention of lying. Deus Verdi has already rested in peace. Since Dia had been with me during the Emily incident, she knew what that meant. From there, I calmly told her our story, mine and Deus. When I possessed him, Deus was already in a deceased state. He had been trying to kill me. In the end, I properly faced him and conducted his funeral. He might be pitiful, but he doesn't deserve sympathy. Nevertheless, in the end, he departed with regrets about his own life. I didn't ask for forgiveness, nor did I claim he was a good person. I knew that Dia wouldn't relate to it even if she heard about it. I just told her that he was a sad person. He regretted his actions towards others. What does that matter to me? However, Dia gritted her teeth and responded. Whether that jerk regretted or repented, or begged me while crying. It doesn't matter to me. He's dead, right? It's better that way. He was someone I didn't need in my life. Her anger was justified, so I simply nodded without saying anything. Also, I'm truly sorry. But to me, you are no different from him. However, considering your actions in North Sweden and your behavior today, you're undoubtedly a different person. I'll admit, you're hundreds or even thousands of times more impressive than Deus. I once wished to have such a family member in the past. However, Dia added, Still, in the end, you are still Deus. That damn face keeps haunting me like some kind of trauma. I understand. No matter how different I was as a person, it was still Deus' body that I possessed. Asking Dia for understanding was a terribly selfish request. I'm sorry for acting differently from what my heart wants. Every time I see that face, it always makes me uncontrollably angry. Of course you would be. That was also a truly natural reaction. Dia forced a bitter smile, understanding that. You speak as if you are my real brother. I'll make an effort to become that. Perhaps because it was an answer she didn't expect at all. Dia stared blankly at me with her mouth open. My family has been broken since I was very young. It fell apart before I could do anything. My mother despised me for being able to see ghosts. My father got scared and ran away from me. Even my grandmother, who had been a source of comfort, passed away while I was in the military. Although I hoped to see her again even as a ghost, my grandmother never appeared. To me, my family was already wrecked, and it was something I could never have. And also something I had always envied. You may not want it, but I will make an effort to be an older brother you can be proud of. Because this was also the last promise I made with Deus Verdi. After staring at me blankly for a brief moment, Dia chuckled and turned her gaze out the window. A lingering bitter smile was still drawn on her lips. We had both been hurt by and longed for our families. Indeed. Silently nodding, Dia cautiously met my eyes. She forced a smile even though the corners of her lips were trembling. That indicated that she still couldn't smile brightly while looking at Dea's face. Nevertheless, she responded honestly, albeit with an awkward expression. If you were really my brother, how nice would things have? Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 62. Harold Hazard. Chapter 62. Harold Hazard. Harold Hazard. I calmly bowed my head and greeted King Orpheus as I entered the audience chamber. If any of the other nobles or vassals had seen this, they would have considered it to be impertinent and caused an uproar, but since this was practically a private meeting, I didn't feel the need to go overboard with the formalities. The pleased King Orpheus, as he responded with a hearty smile. You have a keen eye for people. You noticed that I don't particularly enjoy excessive formality. I simply answered that I figured it out when I saw the king turn away immediately when Dia adhered to etiquette and knelt towards him. However, in reality, I only did so because I remember him saying something similar in the game. By the way, did you spend some quality time with your sister? Yes, thanks to that, I also got to explore the capital. It is surprising. I thought you wouldn't really care about your sister or other family members. King Orpheus tapped his chin before standing up from the throne and walking towards me. The Archmage, Ropelican, who had been standing on the king's right side, naturally followed behind. Well, only the final trial remains. Normally, overcoming even one trial would be challenging, but you managed to solve two of them quite remarkably. In the first trial, you managed to defeat the Mage Tribunal Judge, Tyron, and proved your abilities. King Orpheus patted my shoulder as if to praise me for my impressive achievement. In the second trial, you provided comfort and healing by helping my sister Eleanor break free from the nightmare that had been plaguing her. The king applied more pressure, firmly gripping my shoulder. It was as if he was trying to prevent me from escaping. Now only the final trial remains. Once this is completed, the kingdom will officially recognize you as a dark mage. It's truly a historic event. A kingdom that vehemently rejected dark mages would directly hire a dark mage and even grant them a separate position. It would probably create the stir for a few years, and my name would undoubtedly go down in history. However, I didn't care about such things. And from what I've seen, it seems that you already have some idea about the final trial, don't you? I chose to remain silent. Unlike the first two trials, I had known about the final trial since I was first imprisoned. In fact, the last trial was related to the king on a personal level. It was a significantly different problem compared to the previous two trials. You remember this note, right? King Orpheus unfolded the crumpled note in his hand. It was the note I sent him to read in case his trust in me wavered during my imprisonment. On it was the last will by King Orpheus' late father, King Offert. Stay foolish. Considering it was the late king's final will to his son, who succeeded him, the phrase didn't seem to make much sense. Regardless of how one looked at it, it certainly seemed more like a curse than a blessing. Looking at the content of the note in his hand, King Orpheus pursed his lips as if something deep inside him had been exposed. His grip on my shoulder tightened, making it seem like he was forcibly leaning on me. This is the final trial. Since you already seem to know about it, it could be considered as the easiest trial. When he glanced away from the note, forcing an easygoing smile, and looked at me, the king appeared to be insecure. Why did my father advise me to continue staying foolish when I must bear the burden of this kingdom? In all honesty, it was a curiosity that I expected he would never be able to figure out. If the previous two trials were assessments of whether I had the ability to help the citizens of Griffin Kingdom, the last one was just a matter of resolving the king's personal dilemma. Suddenly, I thought of a story from the Bible that I had read a long time off, how Joseph, one of Jacob's 12 sons, interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. Now, I felt like Joseph, who gained Pharaoh's trust by interpreting his dreams. I wondered if I would gain the king's trust if I could decipher the late king's will. My mouth wouldn't open easily. Despite visualizing this moment multiple times, I wasn't confident that King Orpheus would be able to endure it. At this moment, my only concern was to avoid making a mistake. Even in the game, King Orpheus would crumble if I took the wrong route and he realized the truth. It would start with absent-mindedness and escalated to delusions, hallucinations, and even phantom pain, his condition worsening to the point that it would severely shake the Griffin Kingdom and lead to its downfall. However, there was a route where he managed to overcome all of that and grow. There was also a route for him to repent and vow not to repeat the same mistakes. That was why, as someone who had seen that future, I could confess about being a dark mage. From now on, after the pause, I calmly continued speaking to King Orpheus, whose pupils were dilated and was unable to contain his nervousness. Your Majesty, I request that you try to maintain composure and listen to my words carefully. Gulp. As if indicating his level of nervousness, the sound of the king swallowing his saliva resonated throughout the audience chamber. This was also an episode that existed in the game. It was a connected quest given by King Orpheus that ran through the game, to the extent that it affected the main episodes as well. Back then, starting with confusion about the late King Offert's last will, it eventually unraveled various secrets within the kingdom and the dark secrets concealed by the royal family. Although the will could be simply perceived as a curse on the sun, it was a serious statement that could shake the entire Griffin Kingdom to its core. It served as the starting point to understanding where the kingdom's absolute enmity toward black magic originated from and the reasons behind it. It implied that the identity of the royal family and the deeply rooted Griffin origin had actually been corrupt to the core till date. The reason Your Majesty's father, the late King Offert, left such a will is solely because he was thinking of Your Majesty. For my own sake. What does that mean? As a father, the late king hoped that his son wouldn't come across the truth, but ironically, because of that will, Orpheus ended up reaching the truth about the Griffin royal family's disgustingly persistent hypocrisy. Their acts of hypocrisy and wickedness that deceived tens of millions of citizens. In reality, they were standing over a pile of corpses they had accumulated over time. Your Majesty, your ancestors who established the illustrious dynasty of Griffin through numerous wars and victories. It was at that moment the old truth, obscured by layers of dust, came to light. Were actually dark mages. Step, step, step. The footsteps, echoing with a loud resonance, filled the silent corridor as we continued forward without saying a word. It was as if each step carried some weight, as if someone was contemplating something. In particular, King Orpheus' steps seemed to hasten unintentionally. It was a sign that the Archmage immediately noticed, as he stared at the king with concern. At the intersection of the corridor on the first floor, the path on the right would lead us to exit the dining hall, while the path on the left would lead us to the garden outside. A griffin statue was placed in the middle of the intersection, as if to force us to make a choice. A woman, her face covered with black cloth, slowly appeared from inside. You're right. It is here. Just as you said, there's something inside here. Just to be sure, I sent the dark spiritualist ahead to confirm it. I calmly grasped the wings of the griffin statue and pulled them downward with force. With a grinding sound, the wings folded, and the wall behind it began to open. Seeing that, King Orpheus and Archmage Ropelican muttered gloomily and discontentedly in low voices. They probably never thought that there would be such a secret passage in the royal palace. Let's go in. As I led the way, suddenly, the underground path I went through 2 months ago at the Verdi Mansion came to mind. However, this passage was much more stable and well-constructed. Inside was a record room that looked like a library, with books sticking out everywhere and a massive desk at the center. What is this? The griffin crests were scattered all over the place, symbolizing that everything here belonged to the royal family. The Archmage carefully picked up a book from the desk, brushing off the accumulated dust. Then his eyes opened wide with surprise. The title wasn't written on the book, but its dark red color suggested that it contained information regarding hemomancy. Hemomancy, which dealt with manipulating blood, was one of the subjects of black magic that stood side by side with necromancy and cadavermancy. This is such an impressive place. If I had known about it when I was alive, I would have lost all reason and tried to infiltrate it somehow. The dark spiritualist could only remain calm because she was already dead. Otherwise, she might have literally gone wild and devoured books as she entered. King Orpheus dragged himself with heavy steps towards the central desk. Next to the picture placed in front of it, faded words with dried ink. The king's eyes quivered upon seeing that. In the picture stood a young boy brightly smiling. Judging from his appearance, he seemed to be quite good-looking. Though he was a bit small in stature, His smile suggested that he was well loved by many people. And I knew his identity. Luaneth Leden Griffin. He was the youngest son of the Griffin royal family 200 years ago. A son born of a different woman from his brothers. A son who could be considered the king's shame. He also went by another name, Haralhazard. He was the dark mage who single-handedly brought the Griffin kingdom to the brink of destruction. The very villain who instilled a deep-seated hatred towards black magic throughout the current Griffin kingdom. Beneath the picture where numerous letters filled the space, handwritten correspondences exchanged between the king of the Griffin kingdom of that time and Haralhazard. All of them were written during the time when Haralhazard was carrying out massacres, containing detailed information about which Castletown's forces were out or facing shortages of supplies. At the end was a single phrase, "To my beloved son." The phrase painfully pierced King Orpheus' heart. Crumple. Orpheus clutched the letter roughly with trembling hands. Haralhazard was supposed to be the diabolical villain akin to a plague on the kingdom. However, as he read the letter, it became clear that it was all actually a self-fabricated conflict engineered by the royal family. Tears streamed down the king's face as he slowly turned his gaze towards me. "You." The voice was filled with such intense resentment that he could almost be mistaken to be chewing on his own words. "Did you know all along?" With eyes bloodshot from tears, he vehemently demanded an answer. I met his eyes with composure and nodded slightly. "Yes, I knew." And then, slam. Repelikayan. King Orpheus struck the desk and shouted as if his throat was about to burst, calling for the Archmage. Thickly piled dust scattered in all directions as the Archmage's extensive mana permeated the space. Calmly closing his eyes, Ropelican tapped the floor with his staff, ready to receive the command. "Yar." I wasn't sure if he was struggling with his words because of the shock or if it was because of guilt towards me. Whatever it was, King Orpheus covered his face in his hands. A voice with desperation resonated from behind those hands. "Arrest him." Amidst excruciating pain, as though his flesh were being carved away, the king issued his order. Soon after, shackles made of the Archmage's mana surrounded my entire body. I accepted it in. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 63. The Verdi Siblings. Chapter 63. The Verdi Siblings. The Verdi Siblings. Yawn. It was already past noon. People momentarily paused their bustling footsteps to have a hearty lunch, and Dia, who had been curled up on the bed while others sat at the dining table, stretched herself out. She felt refreshed and light, perhaps because she overslept for quite a while before waking up. A gentle smile automatically formed on her face as she began brewing coffee in her pajamas. Here, there wasn't any need to worry about the servants' glances, no need to rise with a frown due to fief duties, and no need to start working as if chased by something. I was so nervous when I entered Grey Pond. When she heard that Deus surrendered himself, she thought another significant incident was about to unfold. However, after arriving here and confirming it herself, it turned out he was actually favored by the king. Furthermore, Dia became even more at ease after learning that he also resolved Princess Eleanor's chronic disease. He says he has to complete some trial or something, but I'm sure he'll handle it well. Slurp. Dia moistened her throat with coffee and gazed gently out the window. Having been allowed to stay in a guest room in the royal palace, she wore a big, satisfied smile. When she heard they would serve a separate meal for her, she wondered what it would be. Filled with anticipation, a faint smile crept onto her face. Having a vacation is so wonderful. Before coming here, she left her fief duties to the eldest son, Darius. Knowing him, she was sure he was handling it adeptly. She took another sip of coffee. Wondering which coffee beans they were using that made it so tasty, she briskly walked to check the packaging containing the coffee beans. However, at that moment, clunk. The door suddenly swung open and knights clad in armor rushed in. Startled and wondering what was happening, Dia instinctively stepped back. Sir RRNG. Along with the chilling sound of swords being drawn, they pointed at her neck. The knights' movements were precise, disciplined, and well-trained. Among them, a man who wore a lone red embellishment on his headgear spoke. He appeared to be the leader. Dia Verdi, you are arrested for treason against the kingdom. Well, what kind of nonsense was this? Just yesterday, she kneeled before the king to build a positive image. Deus? But Dia quickly began to rack her brain. It must be that the trial that Deus said he was going to complete had gone wrong. With that thought, Dia shouted in anger. Where is Deus? What about him? Shut up, criminal. You can at least tell me that, can't you? He's my brother. What happened to Deus? Although she knew she was making a scene here, she had already gone too far to back off. Anxiety throbbed in her chest, making it impossible to ignore. However, one of the knights who had sneaked behind Dia precisely struck the back of her head. She collapsed to the floor like her consciousness had gone out like a flame. It was this moment that Dia's vacation came to an end. Hearing Dia's groans, I slowly turned my gaze to the side. When she was thrown into prison unconscious, I was a bit taken aback. But now, she was sitting next to me, leaning on my shoulder. If someone saw this sight, they might have mistaken her for simply sleeping. Ouch, my head. Waking up, Dia furrowed her brow and shook her head repeatedly. When she met my eyes and realized she was leaning on me, she quickly moved away, fluttering like a startled chicken. Whoa, what the heck? Because she suddenly moved with intensity, Dia clutched her head. It seemed that a headache had unexpectedly struck. Her expression twisted in discomfort. After a brief moment passed, she regained her composure and noticed my jacket hanging on her shoulders. I thought it would be cold since she was just in simple pajamas whilst in the chilly prison air. So I draped my jacket over her. It's so cold. Dia looked furtively at me. Now, wearing my jacket, she cleared her throat before asking me. I roughly understand the situation, you know? We ended up like this because of some trial or something, right? As expected from Dia. When I nodded at her in acknowledgement, she sighed heavily. What was it exactly? The king seemed to favor you quite a bit. How did everything change in just one day? I can't answer that. This was a problem that Dia shouldn't inquire about recklessly. Because with one wrong move, the Griffin royal family's origins could be uprooted. You can't answer my question even though I got involved in this too? Dia, gesturing subtly with her hand, was trying to point out the situation. But still there was no way I could respond to that. Sigh, okay. What's the point of forcing someone who won't talk? She pouted a little before coming to my side again, leaning on my shoulder like before. It's because it's too cold. After spitting out words with a bad attitude, she turned her gaze outside the bars. They weren't inside the prison under the Mage Tribunal judges, but an underground prison directly managed by the royal family. Not only were there many imprisoned criminals here, but also quite a number of evil spirits as well. It would be possible for me to escape using them. However, the problem lies in the Archmage's apprentices. They were watching me menacingly, ready to turn me into ashes the moment they saw any sign of me using mana. Furthermore, a kind of shackle on my wrists partially blocked my mana. Thus, I would inevitably lose if I engaged in a battle of speed. So, are we going to be executed together now? That's a possibility. Possibility? Are there any other options? I confirmed her suspicion in silence, recalling King Orpheus' last reaction. With tears streaming down his face, he ordered my arrest, filled with apology and lament. The sight of King Orpheus breaking down that I personally witnessed is different from what I had seen before. It differed from the king's destructive path, where he avoided his responsibilities, succumbing to complete insanity and escaping reality. Now, he clearly acknowledged what needed to be done, and that was why he arrested me to cover up the truth. This kind of situation has never happened on any of the routes. After discovering the truth, there were only awkward endings where he asked Arya, the protagonist, to keep silent for the sake of the kingdom, or an ending where the king went crazy and didn't remember anything. There was no ending where he directly ordered someone to be arrested like this. I saw a glimmer of hope. He was unable to bear responsibility and yet was also unable to kill me to cover it up completely. That was the meaning of my arrest. Perhaps by now, King Orpheus was alone, struggling with his thoughts in anguish and pulling his hair out. He might be drowning his sorrows in alcohol or banging his head against the wall. Or he might be stuck in the secret passage, reading all related records. I didn't know what choice he would make. If the situation leads to an execution, he'll have to break out of prison, even by force. Before having an audience with the king, I secretly hid Lemegeton in a place known only to the Dark Spiritualist and me. Additionally, the Dark Spiritualist was currently following the king closely, checking what decision he would make. That was why I could calmly wait inside the prison. However, if the king decided to execute us at that time, I would have no other way. I could only hold on to this way out. After escaping using Lemegeton and necromancy, I would threaten to bring the royal family's secrets to light, thus holding sway over Orpheus. Well, it's not what I want to happen. In the end, the story would unfold in the direction I desired. Then, the king would have no choice but to officially acknowledge me. However, I didn't want to achieve that through a filthy fight in the mud. I hoped it would happen through the king's genuine blessings and a smile. Hey, I was organizing my thoughts when Dia tapped me on the shoulder, calling me. When I met her eyes, she looked at me strangely. You need to tidy up your hair a bit. It's too long. You're surprisingly calm in this situation. Regardless, our heads will be separated from our bodies, won't they? After all, I am not the one making the decision. On another note, your hair is truly too long. She was right. The strands of my hair were on the verge of poking into my eyes. The hair behind my head had also grown long enough to touch my neck. It'll help you to cut it later. It'll feel refreshing once you go completely bald. Dia played with my hair as she pleased. However, I warned her because it made my face itch when she brushed my hair into it. Tone down your pranks. I'm just bored. Dia's murmuring voice mixed with the sound of approaching footsteps and a staff tapping on the ground. Seeing the Archmage's apprentices startled and hastily greeting the person, I had a feeling I knew who it was. It was Archmage Ropelican Linus. He was looking at me from a standing position outside the bars, lost in thought for a moment. I chose to remain seated with Dia, instead keeping my gaze fixed on him without getting up. Ropelican sighed and bowed his head. I'm sorry. It was an apology that carried a variety of meanings. The Verdi family's eldest son, guardian of the Northern Mountain Range, giant of the North, and many more monikers. Darius Verdi, who had acquired some rather dramatic nicknames, was sitting on his bed with his arms crossed in a small hotel room in Greypond. Because of his build, the room had become even smaller. Currently, he was silently waiting for the news. Clang. The door opened right on cue and a group of people entered. They were the trio of the Scrapyard Nomads, a force leading the resistance movement in Clark Republic. Although they were rude rebels who didn't bother to knock, Darius wasn't bothered by such things. As they trained together, Darius found himself getting along well with the members of the Scrapyard Nomads, even more than he expected. Surprisingly, they held no grudges and were much more broad-minded than he thought, coolly accepting defeat, which Darius found appealing. However, he still didn't like their leader, Findene. Anyway, the Scrapyard Nomads members rushed in anxiously while making a fuss. The rumors are true. They've been arrested. They even seized the Verdi family's carriage in the royal palace. Humph. There was only one reason why Darius was here. Following Dia's departure for Greypond, he, too, came to Greypond, trailing her secretly. From Dia's perspective, she advised Darius to stay in the fief, fearing that she might be captured along with Deus and executed as a traitor. It was indeed a crisis for the family, since it had been revealed that a family member was a dark mage. However, as the eldest son, Darius couldn't just sit idly in Norsweden, so he secretly followed. Until yesterday, everything seemed quite fine. There were no signs of an arrest or encirclement by the kingdom's army. Instead, Deus and Dia spent a warm time together. Even for Darius, who regularly received reports from the Scrapyard Nomads, it was surprising information, but it also brought a sense of satisfaction. However, today, upon learning that all of Dia's gifts for the king had been completely burnt and the carriage was seized, Darius couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. The meaning of that was clear. Deus and Dia had been arrested. It was unknown whether it was because Deus was a dark mage or for some other reason. Phew. Darius firmly gripped his sword. I guess I have to fulfill my role as the eldest son. Right now, if he made a move recklessly, it might not only endanger the lives of the two, but also result in the utter downfall of the Verdi family. No, in fact, at this point, wasn't it just a matter of time? Perhaps it was already the end of the family's extended history. Setting aside such minor details, Darius took a deep breath and steeled himself before declaring with a sigh, I will come and rescue the two from. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 64. Darius and the Trio. Chapter 64. Darius and the Trio. Darius and the Trio. Yawn. Dia yawned and slumped down, naturally leaning against shoulder. Feeling her warm weight, I pretended to be bothered by her careless action. You're too close. HM? Then, Dia turned her head, which was still resting on my shoulder, and replied, It's because you're the most comfortable thing to lean against in prison. Also, it's normal for siblings to have this kind of physical contact. She responded shamelessly. The only sibling relationship I had seen up close was between King Orpheus and Princess Eleanor. The two seemed quite close to each other, so it somewhat made sense. Yet, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being deceived by Dia. Dia quickly turned away again. It feels more comfortable if I don't see your face. Well, if that was the case. Since I had decided to let it slide, Dia chuckled and brought up the Archmage's proposal from earlier. What do you plan to do about that? He said that he could help us escape. It's not impossible to escape from this place as long as we accept his offer, right? Archmage Ropelican had secretly approached Dia and me, offering to help us break out of prison. Unexpectedly, he proposed to take our side. He apologized for the extremely unreasonable treatment, despite my success in overcoming 3 nearly impossible trials. As I was unable to give an immediate answer, the Archmage left, promising to return later. Normally, I would have accepted his offer and thanked him with gratitude. However, I was somewhat skeptical about Ropelican's proposal. Is that really the true intention of his proposal? Huh? What are you talking about? Unable to comprehend the meaning behind my words, Dia pressed her head more firmly against my shoulder. She seemed to urge me to get straight to the point rather than beat around the bush. Feeling her weight, I expressed my thoughts clearly. Archmage Ropelican is an incredibly loyal person. Even among those who are close to the king, He can be considered as the closest aide since the late king's time. The relationship between Ropelican and King Orpheus was beyond that of a king and his vassal. Archmage Ropelican was in charge of the young Orpheus' education, and Orpheus thought of him as a life mentor. They were practically family, so Orpheus never kept any secrets from Ropelican. While Dia was impressed with the detailed information I grasped from the situation in a short span of time, in reality, I was just recounting what I had witnessed in the game. All of Ropelican's actions are with the royal family in mind. In other words, he offered this proposal for the sake of King Orpheus. If the mage tribunal judge, Tyrannoel Velicus, strictly served the kingdom, Ropelican was loyal to the Griffin royal family, or to be precise, to King Orpheus. There was a significant difference. If it were Tyran, he wouldn't just overlook such matters. He wouldn't have simply overlooked the fact that the royal family had supported the dark mage who massacred people throughout the kingdom in the past, and, on top of that, that very mage was of royal family blood. However, Ropelican was different. For the sake of King Orpheus, he would tolerate and silently ignore such matters. Would someone like Ropelican really go against the king's order and attempt to free me? I could guarantee there was no way he would do that. Hence, I needed to consider the opposite. He wasn't trying to release me because he believed I was unjustly accused. He simply intended to eliminate someone like me before I could become an obstacle to the king. It seems like the king is genuinely troubled with what to do with me. He couldn't decide whether he had to fulfill the promise and take responsibility, or silently draw the sword for the sake of the royal family and the kingdom. Suddenly, a part of Hamlet's soliloquy by Shakespeare came to my mind. If I slightly altered the phrase to fit this situation, to kill or not to kill, that was the question. King Orpheus was tormented by indecision in the face of this problem. If that were the case, Ropelican would rather get rid of me, who was the problem, so that the king wouldn't have to make a choice at all. Things are going better than I thought. Unlike when I took the wrong route in the game, the king didn't fall into shock or go crazy due to the guilt of being unable to overcome it. Clearly, he acknowledged his situation and was in distress. Therefore, I didn't know the outcome. However, it was better to wait for now. Huff, huff. Late at night, Darius, who was unconsciously breathing heavily, quietly inspected the sword at his waist. Even though the sword was almost an extension of his body and had accompanied him throughout his life, he kept checking it from time to time, perhaps out of anxiety. Wow, I never thought I would infiltrate the Griffin Royal Palace. It would have been nice if the chief was here as well. What should we take back as a souvenir? On the other hand, the trio of scrapyard nomads who came along were acting as if they were on a field trip, laughing and enjoying themselves, leaving Darius dumbfounded and bewildered. This was a stealth operation to infiltrate the Griffin Royal Palace, and it was quite astonishing that they could remain so relaxed. Turns out they didn't follow that crazy woman around for no reason. They might not have been like that when they still led ordinary lives. But once they broke out of their shell, they were no different from Findinay. Was this how people changed in order to survive in the Clark Republic, infamous for being full of horrible rumors? I can't really tell whether they've adapted, or they were just completely broken. Regardless, thanks to these people, Darius felt somewhat relieved. Thus, he took a deep breath and looked up at the high wall. Although their bodies were already concealed in the darkness, to break in, they had to conquer the towering walls fencing the royal palace. Due to the risk of being exposed when using mana, Darius decided to crawl up. So he loosened up his grip and approached the wall cautiously. One of the trio asked Darius, "Are you really okay with it?" "What do you mean?" Darius wondered what he meant, as they were just cheerfully talking a while ago. However, the latter unexpectedly brought up some sensible points. "I understand your siblings are precious, but if things go wrong, all of you could really lose your heads, you know? And the Verdi household itself could face extinction." Darius paused for a moment upon hearing this. The statement was not wrong. After all, their aim was to free Darius' two siblings who were confined. Furthermore, one of them happened to be a dark mage, and dark mages were vehemently hated in the kingdom. Even if they were family, attempting to protect a dark mage could lead to more than just Darius losing his life. Could spell the end of the Verdi household. Yes, family is important. If asked to name the most important thing to him, he would undoubtedly answer that it was the household's glory. The name of Verdi the giant who guarded the northern mountain range was a source of pride for Darius. Yet, 2 months ago, after exposing their household's accumulated dirty deeds, they decided to start anew. With a tightly clenched fist, Darius firmly declared, "However, I am not the only Verdi. Those two also carry the name of Verdi with pride." Hearing those words, the trio grinned and chimed in, "Just admit that your siblings are precious to you. Yeah, no need to use the family as an excuse. Still, you've changed a lot since we first met." Ahem. Feeling awkward, Darius cleared his throat, and one of the trio handed him a rope draped over his shoulder. "I brought this since it seemed like we might need it. We'll help you get inside, so just hang this from the castle wall." "Huh? You guys will help me get inside?" Wondering what they meant, the trio confidently took their positions right in front of the wall, creating a makeshift jumping platform for Darius with their hands. Darius was dumbfounded. Sigh. Since this was preferable to crawling up the wall, Darius seized the opportunity and leaped. Heave-ho. Perhaps due to the trio's impressively synchronized movements, Darius jumped so high that he was surprised by the outcome. His body truly zoomed through the sky. He then managed to easily cross the bars on the wall fence and landed smoothly on the other side. Obviously, the trio had done this kind of thing several times during their resistance movements. They were not just skillful but also experienced. Just as Darius was about to secure the rope on the wall to help the trio to cross. You're quite audacious, huh? The chilling voice of an elderly man echoed from behind. Darius threw the rope down, his neck creaking as he turned. Simultaneously, he drew the sword from his waist. Certainly, it was a beastly strike. Darius demonstrated a sharp sword strike, proudly showcasing that he wasn't called the giant guarding the northern mountain range for nothing. He had grown significantly through rigorous training, especially following the crushing defeat against Findine. Just like Findine, the attack was so fierce that one could say that he was overpowering when facing him. Thud. Before he could land a proper attack, the pressure from the mana pouring out of the elderly man pushed Darius backwards, causing him to collide with the wall. Stuck to the wall like a painting, he could only open and close his mouth repeatedly while confirming the presence that had subdued him with a single move. How reckless of you. Your personality is completely different from that of your solemn and reliable younger brother. Perhaps you're agitated because your siblings have been arrested? It was an impressive elderly figure with a staff resembling an ancient tree, wearing a robe so magnificent it exuded an air of mystery, and adorned with a striking white beard. It's quite amusing that you thought there wouldn't be any magic on the royal palace's walls. If I hadn't discovered you in advance, you would have been roasted by now. Archmage Ropelican Linus clicked his tongue while staring at Darius. Did you come to rescue your siblings? Margrave. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 65, The Phantom of Griffin. Chapter 65, The Phantom of Griffin. The Phantom of Griffin. Did you come to rescue your siblings? Margrave Norsweden? Darius was perplexed about what answer to give as a response to Archmage Ropelican's question. Should he uphold his beliefs, or should he weave in a lie within his excuse just to get by? Though his heart leaned towards the latter, his mouth wouldn't comply with his pride. Yes. Darius openly acknowledged his intention. After speaking, he somehow regretted his own foolishness. However, Ropelican seemed rather satisfied with this, chuckling with a wry smile. I like your confidence. You resemble your father, Damos, the giant of the north. Ssrrk. As Ropelican lowered his staff, Darius coughed while slumping down from the wall with considerable difficulty. Outside the wall, the trio were asking if he was okay. But it wasn't a situation where he could respond. Are those your companions? That's good, then. Let them in for now. Pardon? Darius couldn't comprehend the situation, but since he was prompted by Ropelican to act fast, he securely fixed the rope. The trio swiftly crossed the wall. Huh? What's this? Did you betray us? The bewildered trio immediately questioned Darius. However, they could only open and close their mouths like goldfish, unable to utter another word. The Archmage had cast a spell to block their sounds, making their sudden attempt to shout at the unexpected situation seem like a kind of theatrical performance. Ropelican gestured to Darius and the silenced trio, and said, Follow me. He'll take you to them. King Orpheus still sat in the royal family's secret chamber, flipping through the records. Just like the flame on the candlestick placed beside him, his gloomy heart continuously hesitated and wavered intensely. His bloodshot eyes and tear-streaked traces revealed a sense of fatigue as he turned the pages unfolding the Griffin royal family's origin. With each turn, his chest trembled. He was overwhelmed by guilt and disgust, almost provoking a feeling of nausea. Despite taking a strong stance against inhumane acts in the Clark Republic, Orpheus found the authors of the records to be no different from a pot calling the kettle black, which was quite embarrassing. Orpheus couldn't help but be shocked by the fact that to prevent the revelation of the country founded by a dark mage, the royal family's history also aggressively suppressed fellow dark mages. These records were indeed an abyss of dark secrets. Just when the king thought it couldn't get any worse, after flipping through a few more pages, he was exposed to even more diabolical thoughts. However, one thing strongly resonated throughout the page-san obsession with being royalty. Perhaps this obsession stemmed from their origin as dark mages, who were always disdained and looked down upon. Or maybe the bloodline might have carried an innate ambition and stubbornness for power and authority. As time passed and the authors changed, the obsession continued to persist like a deep-seated delusion, portraying a strong dedication to upholding the royal family's name. It was like mother. The more he read, the more Orpheus recalled his mother's excessive attachment to royalty. Having been educated by Ropelican, he could resist being influenced by her. His sister, Eleanor, on the other hand, was severely tormented by their mother, Hylan. Therefore, Orpheus and Eleanor both harbored a strong resistance towards formalities, despite being in the direct line of royalty. Huff! His eyes stung from fatigue. Even with the crushing weight of guilt, King Orpheus slowly returned to his original self. Everything was confusing and disgusting, and he hated it to the point of anger. I cannot evade responsibility. In the end, all this responsibility was an unavoidable weight that the current royal family had to bear. I'm sorry, Deus. In a low tone, he apologized to Deus, whom he had imprisoned. Despite knowing all these truths, Deus kept his lips sealed until Orpheus asked. Deus kept silent. He did not let anything out, even when he held information that could destroy Griffin Kingdom. At the time, the king arrested Deus immediately to prevent him from speaking to anyone. He did this to protect the royal family. However, the more Orpheus pondered about it, the more Deus truly seemed like a loyal subject. Orpheus slowly stood up. Though it was late at night, he considered going now to release Deus from captivity. However, bang! The door suddenly closed forcefully. Despite there being no wind, the candlelight extinguished as if abruptly snuffed out. Wondering what was happening, he manifested mana in his hand to illuminate the room. Foolish kid. A grim face emerged in the light. Startled, King Orpheus took a step back without even being able to scream. The grim face followed Orpheus as it was. The horns, which were slightly growing on its forehead, made it look like an undeveloped demon. Its protruding teeth and mist-like body intensified the eerie aura. Do you know how long I've spent to build this dynasty? But you try to bring it down in just one day. What are you? He desperately swung at the face, but it passed through without any resistance. The grim face with a demon-like image opened its mouth. However, contrary to its size, it spoke in a low, whispering voice that made it feel like dozens of bugs entered through the king's ear. I am the owner of this land. What? The previously chilling voice changed tone as it conveyed the secret. It now took on the high-pitched and temperamental tone of a woman. Not only that, the grim face gradually morphed into someone Orpheus was familiar with. Mother? Now resembling Hylan Lydon Griffin, the face chuckled. I am your mother. It changed once more, adopting the imposing features of someone he idolized, along with the deep-set wrinkles he always remembered. Your father. The face shifted again. This time, it assumed the presence of someone deeply etched in his memory. Your great-grandfather. Then it reverted to its original grim face. And there, it declared naturally, I embody centuries of history. I am Griffin itself. You. It looked as if a centuries-old record was written by a single person. It personified the mad obsession with being a part of the royal family. King Orpheus could immediately recognize it. This existence was also the source of all evils, the Griffin family's ancestor who harbored diabolical thoughts. Now then, squelch. The big mouth opened wide. Hideous teeth and a thick, probing tongue lashed out towards Orpheus. It is your turn. There was no way to resist it. Orpheus was caught and devoured. He struggled and convulsed several times, but soon, black smoke emanated from his whole body, and he regained composure. Then, he suddenly stood up, cracked his neck, smiled, and said, Where did this phantom come from? And there, observing the unfolding situation, was her, the dark spiritualist. He addressed such a figure, who, in a unique twist, found herself following her apprentice's orders. The royal palace is not a place for vermin-like evil spirits like you to wander. When Orpheus reached out, a fierce mana surged, trying to subdue the dark spiritualist. Vermin. The dark spiritualist, now able to control her mana with the help of Deus, barely defended herself and escaped through the wall. TCH. Her resistance was stronger than he expected, but it didn't matter. Since she was already dead, returning to her master would yield the same result anyway. Quang. Phew. After opening the door and stepping outside, Orpheus took a deep breath. It didn't matter how many times he'd done this, the feeling of being alive felt good. Taking a big stride to the left of the corridor, Orpheus came out to the garden outside the royal palace. The soldiers who saw him immediately saluted. However, informed the royal knight commander, mage tribunal judge, and the archmage to enter the palace immediately. Orpheus said with a big smile, Tell them to carry out the execution of the criminal who insulted the royal family. Wow, it's so cold that I thought I was going to die. Shivering from the chilling temperature, Dia expressed joy when her clothes finally arrived. Although I had already lent her my jacket, she was still cold since she was dressed in pajamas. Look away. The scrapyard nomad trio kept staring at Dia, who was attempting to change her clothes. As soon as I warned them, they yelped and lowered their heads. Who were they audaciously staring at? Dia glanced at me and slightly chuckled as if she was in a good mood. She then headed towards a corner of the prison. They still can see me like this, you know? Cover me a bit. After pulling me along and hiding behind me, Dia began to remove her pajamas. It was an unexpected situation, but to shield my sister's bare body, I did my utmost to broaden my shoulders. I maintained a stern expression as I stared at the Archmage, Darius, and the scrapyard nomads who had come to rescue us. I have clearly mentioned that I would consider it carefully. Since King Orpheus hadn't made his decision, I had no plans to escape recklessly and make a fuss by myself. Ropelican avoided my gaze and refused to respond when I frowned and said this. While I appreciated that Darius came here to rescue Dia and me, he just watched the situation unfold oddly without doing anything. When I was about to speak, Dia's bare leg popped out from the side. She stood with one leg in her pants, leaning her back against me. Have a sense of shame. I suddenly directed the words I had intended to say to Darius and Ropelican towards Dia. Huh? That's probably not something you should say. Try living with two men who don't act like your older brothers at all. They're all the same. After saying something like that, she immediately shut her mouth. That's because right now only Dia knew that I was not the real Deus. I would someday have to tell Darius, but now was not the right time. Seeing the magic gun hanging from her leather belt, it seemed she really risked her life entering Grey Pond. I was about to say that everyone should return first and we should continue waiting. However, big trouble. The dark spiritualist shouted as she came through the wall, making a fuss. I had entrusted her to keep an eye on King Orpheus. However, since she came out like this, I wondered if the king made a negative decision. However, the response was beyond my imagination. An evil spirit lurked deep within Griffin Kingdom, possessing the bodies of past kings. Now, it had taken over Orpheus' body. It was so absurd, to the point of being unbelievable. There is such a hidden twist like this? There was no such content in Retry. However, upon a little reflection, it seemed more appropriate to say that it was simply unknown. Because there was no dark mage in the party. The Saintess, too, had temporarily joined the party, but she was not a party member when they were working in Grey Pond. TSK. Did we just waste our efforts? The others who couldn't hear the dark spiritualist's voice were looking at me with strange expressions. Darius had an uncomfortable expression, asking if we should go back, and Ropelican was still awkwardly avoiding eye contact. No. I put on the jacket that Dia handed me and stepped outside the bars. The situation has changed. A thunderous sound of approaching footsteps came from outside. Knights in red armor lined up and entered the prison. They were surprised to see Ropelican here. Soon, a woman with an imposing presence walked forward, straightening out the mess. Despite being the smallest among the armored knights, she stood at the pinnacle of the royal knights, which directly served the royal family. She was Gloria Grace, the royal knight commander. She was the sharpest sword in the kingdom, even being able to match the prowess of Mage Tribunal Judge Tyron O.L. Velicus. With her red hair fluttering, she sharply stared at me and asked, Deus Verdi, the wicked dark mage, a sinner who has insulted the royal family. His Majesty has ordered your immediate execution by the royal knights. How efficient. As I responded with honest sarcasm, Gloria's eyes slightly flickered. There is no trial held for someone claiming to be a dark mage. One cannot expect a fair judgment. How was this different from the witch trials during medieval times? Well, it doesn't matter, right? It didn't matter at all. When you approach me this unreasonably, I'll respond with an equal force of unreasonableness. I wouldn't stop at all. Dia and Darius, too, followed behind and prepared for battle. I quickly realized that if we didn't fight, everyone would die anyway. Do you think you can escape? With a disbelieving expression, Gloria drew her sword. In response, the royal knights also drew their swords, as if choreographed. Swinging those swords in such a narrow passage didn't seem easy. Yet, it wouldn't be a problem for them as they were skilled knights. However, there was something I needed to clarify. I'm not running away. At some point, the Lemegeton brought by the dark spiritualist emitted a subtle black glow in my palm. Like a magician performing card tricks in front of his audience. I skillfully did it in the blink of an eye. I could feel the evil spirits wailing, echoing like reverberations from all around me. You're not running away? As if she considered my words an insult, Gloria gritted her teeth, gripping the sword with both hands and preparing herself. However, I once again clarified. I just want an audience with his. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 66. A Staged Entrance. Chapter 66. A Staged Entrance. A staged entrance. Gloria Grace. Although she was described as formidable, the protagonist had never had a direct confrontation against her in the game. Instead, she played a supporting role, lending her strength to the protagonist when subduing a specific boss. However, as with any game, when a former enemy became an ally, they were significantly nerfed. On the contrary, if an ally suddenly turned into an enemy, their strength seemed to gain an unexpected boost. At this moment, she was the latter case. Gloria Grace was ominously blazing a crimson mana like the three-pronged flame I had seen in the game. "Have you betrayed us, Archmage?" Ahem. Ropelican awkwardly scratched his neck and shook his head as she met his gaze. "It is not so. If His Majesty wishes, I am more than willing to strike down Deus." Hearing that, Dia and Darius were startled and immediately assumed a combat stance. Ropelican asked in doubt, his arms crossed. "However, has His Majesty truly decided to execute Deus?" "No, even if he did, he ordered you to do that." "Yes, I personally received His Majesty's order." Ropelican was dumbfounded. He probably had realized that if the current king was the same Orpheus he knew, even if the king chose to abandon me, he wouldn't seek assistance from others. The king wouldn't have been struggling with such dilemmas until now if he could simply toss me aside so decisively. "Deus, do you have any thoughts?" Ropelican asked for my opinion. Having met Gloria's gaze directly, I answered while slightly shifting my gaze. "His Majesty is currently possessed by an evil spirit. It's a serpent-like entity that has slithered throughout the long history of the Griffin dynasty." Ropelican solemnly listened to me and then glanced towards Gloria. The only reason Gloria's knights still hadn't moved yet was because of this old man, Ropelican. It was because they hadn't confirmed his stance in this situation. Ropelican met my eyes once again before tapping the ground with his staff and responded. "Well, I owe you a debt, so I'll believe you this once. However, if this turns out to be a lie, I will personally take your life before surrendering myself to His Majesty for judgment. Be my guest." An intense mana began to emanate from Ropelican, who stood beside me, wildly surging to the extent that Gloria, biting her lips, felt her own mana was insignificant in comparison. "I never imagined you would turn traitor, Archmage. Gloria, you should remember that all my actions stem from loyalty and affection." The ground began to quake. Soon after, the Archmage's mana permeated in all directions. Bang, bang, bang. Thick and sturdy tree roots swarmed in from all directions, attacking the knights. The knights could not react quickly as they were wearing armor, but they didn't suffer significant damage either. At most, a few of them were knocked unconscious from direct hits to the head. Gloria swiftly wielded her sword and shouted, "Retreat! Fighting against the Archmage underground is unfavorable." The royal knights pulled back as swiftly as an arrow. It was truly an amusing sight but an effective tactical maneuver. In the end, we had no choice but to leave this place. The underground prison had only one passage. I could already predict that the royal knight would immediately surround us the moment we stepped outside. Is there any other way out? Our footsteps were truly heavy as we slowly made our way outside. Despite Ropelican's question, I kept my mouth shut before I eventually opened it again to answer him honestly. "My powers won't be of much use here. There are too few spirits in this place." The dark spiritualist added her concerns from behind. Since the Griffin's ancestors were dark mages, there were no traces of lingering ghosts in the royal palace. And with the malevolent being occupying King Orpheus' body now, something suspicious seemed to be at play. Even the spirits who are supposed to be resting peacefully are absent. When people died, they closed their eyes and fell into a deep sleep. That was what resting in peace meant. However, even the spirits at rest were scarce. Although unsettling, it seemed unnecessary to awaken them with Lemegeton. Considering their meager quantity, it felt like borrowing a cat's paw. Did they completely obliterate all the spirits? Or absorb them like the human bone centipede? According to the dark spiritualist's testimony, the entity bore a resemblance to that of a demon. Thus, there was a significant possibility. In the end, even the necromancy stone, Lemegeton, was useless without spirits that could lend their power to wield it. Tyron seems to be outside as well. Wouldn't you be a match for Tyron? Didn't you already defeat him overwhelmingly? It was already apparent that the powerful mana faintly felt from outside belonged to Tyron. So, I answered honestly, it's not completely impossible, but achieving overwhelming victory like before is far-fetched. It was only possible then because of the numerous spirits asleep in the execution ground. I see. Ropelican, who said he understood that, turned his head towards Darius this time. What about Margrave nor Sweden? Darius looked away awkwardly. Even as the Margrave who protected the border, he was no match for the Royal Knight Commander or the Mage Tribunal Judge. Then what about you? Ropelican turned his gaze to Dia and asked. Dia took out a magic gun from her waist and shrugged. I modified this Republic product to function with mana. However, I doubt it will even be able to scratch the people outside, right? The Scrapyard Nomads trio behind them had nothing to add. Phew. We were considered to be elite, even among the kingdom's elites. But now, we found ourselves in a situation where we were bitten by the tiger and trapped by its strong jaws. This is really depressing. However, Ropelican did not loosen his grip on the staff. The stairs leading outside came into view. It seems like this old man will have to give it a shot. Ropelican sighed. His deliberate attempt to appear unconcerned seemed a bit pathetic, as his own apprentices might be present outside. If this didn't work out, there was still another way. But that was a failsafe that needed to be saved until the very end. Therefore, I held on to Lemegeton tightly and told the dark spiritualist, "We don't know how the situation will unfold. So stick close to me." "Got it." "Huh?" An unexpected response came from behind the dark spiritualist. When the dark spiritualist clung to me, Dia, who had been hidden behind her, came into view. Dia, who couldn't see the dark spiritualist, thought I was talking to her. "Come on, seriously?" Dia turned to face me for no reason, expressing her irritation, but still took a step closer to me. Well, this was for the best. Considering that Dia might lose her life at any moment during this confrontation, it was safer for her to remain by my side. Ahem, it was quite touching. Dia and I turned simultaneously and looked behind upon hearing the ridiculous sob. Moved to tears, Darius was attempting to hold back his emotions as he gazed at us. That's right. This is what a family should be like. This is how the Verdi household should be. Even if our household's long history ends today in this place, I have no regrets. My siblings, we have finally become one. I've never become one with you. Don't overreact, it's embarrassing. And we're not gonna die here today, alright? Even though Dia and I both denied it simultaneously, Darius, still unable to hide his emotions, cleared his throat, moved towards us, and slipped in between us. Then he wrapped his arms around us, and with his strength it wasn't easy to shake him off. "What do you mean by feeling embarrassed?" "That's right. What's there to fear when we, the three siblings, unite?" "Sigh. I told you not to do that, you jerk." I involuntarily sighed. Dia kept hitting Darius' side, but he didn't even flinch. "We may not have been born on the same day, but we will die on the same day. Do you know how terrific that is? It makes me want to recite a poem." "Stop spouting nonsense. You haven't even read a single line from a book. How can you speak about poetry so confidently? You should be applauding the fact that at least I understand the concept of poetry, you know." Despite our protests, Darius, reciting a clumsy self-composed poem, immersed himself in his own sentimentality. Dia buried her face in embarrassment, and I decided to stay silent. I could feel the weight and warmth felt on my shoulders. It was my first time in such a situation, and it was annoying. However, deep inside my heart, it felt like it gave me another clear reason to live. Bickering, fighting, and even if we said we didn't like each other, in the end, we still supported each other. Was this what family was supposed to be like? It wasn't too shabby. It was incredibly refreshing to see the moon in the late-night sky after stepping outside. If the knights in red armor and mage tribunal judges in golden robes lined up before us weren't present, I would have raised a glass under the moonlight while enjoying some snacks. Be on your guard. The opponent is an archmage. I never expected that we would be pitted against each other again so soon. Deus, the Royal Knight Commander, Gloria, and the Mage Tribunal Judge, Tyron, stepped forward to greet us. Their hostility was extraordinary from the beginning, and just standing there made it extremely intolerable. Dia was barely able to hold up against the killing intent, staggering to the point where I had to support her from the side. "Put the strength into your legs. There's no need to confront them, heathen." "Fine." Dia listened obediently, as it was quite burdensome for her. I took a deep breath and stood in front of her. Although I already knew that it wouldn't end easily, witnessing them directly, in reality like this, made it appear to be genuinely challenging. "I can deal with at least one of them. What do you think? Can the three of you deal with the other one?" Ropelican asked while slightly brushing his beard and glancing at me. I let out a sigh before nodding. "I can deal with them myself." Plans were meant to be changed. The moment I brought Lemegeton near my heart, with the thought of pouring everything into it and giving my all right from the start crash, something fell from the sky. The intense dust cloud obscured our view, and Tyron immediately dispersed his mana, thinking this was a ruse by us. Likewise, Gloria swung her massive greatsword to clear the dust as well. As the visibility improved, two individuals confidently appeared between us and them. Long, flowing black hair. It belonged to Arya Rias, the protagonist of this world, and right now, she was looking at me with a smile. "Professor, I just arrived." "Arya." I unconsciously felt a sense of relief when I saw her face, and I wanted to honestly express my gratitude. However, Findene, dressed in a maid uniform, intervened while puffing smoke from a cigarette on the side. "That is nonsense. She's been eagerly awaiting the ideal dramatic moment in a critical situation to make her appearance and make you fall in love with her, master bastard." As a result, I swallowed back the words of gratitude I was about to say. "Wow. Oh shit. You promised not to tell him, didn't you?" I even shared the strawberry from my cake with you. Did I? I thought you didn't like strawberries. I stepped forward upon listening to their conversation. So, it seems like you two managed to enjoy the cake and had a really leisurely time. When I gave the two of them a sharp stare, Arya and Findine both turned toward the enemies at the same time. We just have to deal with those, right? Findine, the assassin maid of Master Bastard, ready for action. It's going to be a blast. Arya drew her sword while Findine shouldered her axe. Sigh. And I could only let out a. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 67, Evil Ghost. Chapter 67, Evil Ghost. Evil Ghost. Wasn't it truly hilarious? Clearly, until just a moment ago, we were in an overwhelmingly disadvantageous situation in this battle. The royal knights who were the strongest in close combat, and the mage tribunal judges who were in charge of handling mages who deviated from the proper path. These supreme powers worked together in the kingdom, where swords and magic coexisted. However, with just these two girls joining the battle, I could start to see the scales tip to our side, which was obscure before. We finally had a winning chance. The power balance on the scales had been restored. Of course, winning here didn't simply mean defeating or eradicating them all. Don't kill anyone. Just clear the path. What? Huh? The two turned back to me with expressions of discontent. I mean, they were the ones trying to kill you, Professor. I was thinking of tearing them apart and feeding them to the dogs. Master Bastard, I don't consider something where no blood is shed as a fight. That's just children playing. Though they had completely opposite personalities, the conclusion they came with was oddly the same, which was quite amusing. Witnessing their bold response, and despite it being a letdown for them, I retorted with unwavering certainty. Just shut up and follow. I had to assert firm control in order to manage people as unrestrained as them. Eventually, they complied with my demands. Got it, Professor. Arya swung her sword with an ecstatic expression. She seemed to be in a good mood. Even though it was a playful sight, a sense of pressure could be felt from her actions. She wasn't the protagonist on her second run after watching the ending for nothing. I suddenly lost interest. Well, considering this axe is pretty lame, I probably wouldn't leave a scratch on their armor anyway. Findine commented sarcastically as she stared at Darius' axe in her hand. Nonetheless, she threw the box she had been carrying on her back to me. Oh right, take this. The box had a bumpy landing, rolling across the floor towards my feet with a rattle. I frowned at the sight. Do you not know what's inside? I do though. How did you even know where a thing like that was hidden? The item I tried to secure by sending Arya and Findine. Depending on whose perspective, it could be considered the most valuable item on the continent. But seeing how Findine handled it, indeed it was a different case for her. Since I needed someone to take care of it, I immediately handed it to Dia, who was right behind me. Something important. Keep it safe. Huh? Since Dia used a magic gun, she wouldn't be much help in combat. Then, the trio from the scrapyard nomad rushed past me and went towards the front. Chief, long time no see. Hiya. You're still wearing that? People from this kingdom really are insane. Watching her comrades gladly run towards her, Findine also playfully smiled. Hey you punks, grab your weapons quickly. Don't make us, the scrapyard nomads, lose face. The trio, who just reunited with Findine, began to brim with energy. It was a stark contrast to their previously listless demeanor. Are they your support? Ropelican, who was standing by my side, brushed his beard and asked. I slightly nodded and responded with confidence. Those two will be able to buy us enough time. They are certainly not ordinary people. Especially that young girl, even I can't gauge her strength at all. Arya, who somehow had started the battle, was now raging like a storm against the mage tribunal judges. Since the judges specialized in facing mages, Arya solely employed her swordsmanship. Be grateful for the professor's mercy. I was originally going to kill everyone here. Due to presiding Judge Tyron's internal injuries from our previous battle, there was a sluggishness in his movements, making it easier for Arya to handle him. Cug. The professor is not someone you can treat as you wish. Arya not only acquired the item I requested, but also her own sword. It was a unique item called Libelungen's sword, which she was now wielding. Looking at the battle, Findine appeared somewhat inferior to her. It seemed that the absence of any equipment she used as a boss in the game made a significant impact. You can go support my maid. Arya can handle it alone. Understood. Ropelican's mana resonated once more, its echo reverberating through the ground. With an unfavorable matchup against the mage tribunal judges, facing the Night Order would be more comfortable for Ropelican. Shall I go too? Darius asked, drawing his sword as he stepped forward. Contemplating which side to aid, he glanced at the Night Order, where Findine stood, then shifted his gaze to Arya on the opposite side. Tisk, you're still scared of her? Huh? Dia clicked her tongue disapprovingly as she looked at Darius, who still bore the trauma from his encounter with Findinay. However, I placed my hand on Darius' shoulder as he was about to confront the Mage Tribunal judges. Break through the Night Order. Follow me closely. Considering Darius' capabilities, he should be able to clear the path ahead, so I called him separately. I also gestured to Dia and instructed her to stay close behind. I am going to go too? Yes, there is something you need to do. I didn't plan it with this intention, but the items inside the box Dia currently held were the most effective tools to resolve this incident. Just as we were about to penetrate the Royal Knight side, clang. Findinay's axe clashed with Gloria's crimson greatsword. With a fierce explosion, the two women moved in sync as if coordinating their breaths. Step aside. Unfortunately, the Royal Knight commander, Gloria, had the upper hand. However, Findinay was someone able to grow stronger over time as the battle continued, so I wasn't sure what might happen if more time passed. As for now, Gloria's dominance between the two of them was evident. Are you nuts? Nevertheless, Findinay's gaze remained unfazed. Instead, she laughed in amusement, showcasing a more diverse set of movements. Findinay's nimble movements mocked the knight's stiff and proper movements. Findinay performed acrobatic stunts, which was born out of her experience facing countless crises as a member of the resistance movement. Despite Findinay suddenly avoiding a heated confrontation, Gloria remained calm and swung her sword with composure. Her proper yet sturdy appearance could be considered the epitome of a knight. Unfortunately, Findinay was the type of person who prioritized the outcome over the process. With her white hair fluttering, Findinay stepped back, and a giant hand emerged from the ground, suppressing Gloria. Such a pathetic magic. Gloria's sword swiftly slashed through the giant hand, reducing it to a handful of soil. Concealed within the pile of dirt, Findinay was able to strike again, this time squarely hitting Gloria's chest. However, the axe's blade was damaged, losing its value as a weapon. This prompted Findinay to raise her foot. She, who had been targeting a single decisive blow, concentrated her mana as if the moment had arrived. Bang! Cook! Gloria was pushed back, but even with such a powerful blow, her armor remained intact. The difference in their equipment's levels are too significant. The more I looked, the more I thought that way. At that moment, Ropelican hurriedly ran to my side and shouted, "By itself, clearing the way is not easy. Can I use a little trick?" Understanding what he was trying to do, I nodded without hesitation. "Come here, Dia." "Huh? Excuse me." Dia didn't expect to be suddenly called, but I ignored her confusion. I placed my hand on her waist and signaled to Ropelican. What are you doing?" Startled, Dia tried to break free, but we were already swept away by the wind and flying into the sky. "I'll leave you with the landing." Blown away by Ropelican's tremendous wind, we flew towards the royal palace. The Mage Tribunal judges or knights, attempting to stop us, aimed their spells and sword auras at us. I was protected by the dark spiritualist's magic, since she was following behind me, by the efforts of my companions below. Kayak. The experience of flying was unfamiliar to Dia as she screamed, wrapping her hands and feet around my neck and waist. It was hard to move around because of Dia, so I searched for a landing spot after turning my gaze towards the royal palace. The ominous energy belonging to the evil spirit who had taken possession of King Orpheus' body had permeated the entire palace, indicating its formidable strength. It was chilling beyond measure. For the first time in a while, encountering an evil spirit in this situation made my heart flutter. Sigh. It turned out that there was still a part of me capable of feeling surprised when facing an evil spirit. With that thought, I chuckled and turned towards the balcony. It was a place filled with memories of Eleanor. Despite landing smoothly with mana, Dia still clung to me like a koala, her body trembling all over. "You're heavy. Get off." Upon my remark, she regained her senses, swiftly separating from me with a startle, then pretending to cough a few times. Being at such a height is scarier than I thought. It is not the same as just peering down from the railing. Of course, anyone would be scared if they flew up like that without any safety measures. I quickly warned Dia, who was lost in her thoughts. "Be sure to take care of the items on your back. I might need your help." "Help? What is that supposed to mean?" I stopped Dia by grabbing her hand. She was trying to open the box to peek at the item inside. "Don't open it." Considering the massive energy spread throughout the royal palace, it was obvious that the evil spirit would notice if there were any slight openings. "Since you have good judgment, you'll figure out what it is once you see it." "All right." Perhaps feeling burdened by the trust one gave her, Dia avoided eye contact. I nodded and headed towards the corridor connecting the banquet hall. Thud. Another massive figure plunged onto the balcony. Unlike how we landed smoothly, he rolled clumsily and only stopped after tumbling against the wall. My knees got scraped. As he groaned, Darius quickly got up. "Do you think I would not follow, and just let the two of you go?" Watching Darius speak confidently, I blinked for a moment but eventually nodded, giving his shoulder a light tap. It is good to have you. Dia and Darius, not expecting such straightforward gratitude, briefly looked at me in a daze. However, I ignored them and headed straight into the corridor. Only then did the two come to their senses and follow behind me. As we entered the corridor, the dark spiritualist frowned and said, "There's a strong energy here. Yes, I can feel it too. Are you talking to a ghost?" Dia realized that I was talking to the dark spiritualist. However, I didn't have time to explain. Though it might not be visible to ordinary people, I could see that the royal palace corridors were already tainted with the energy of the evil spirit. Perhaps it was due to the late hour, but all I could see was darkness, rendering the path concealed and causing me to lose my sense of direction. This was another inconvenience I didn't anticipate. The energy seems to be coming from the audience chamber. I glanced at Dia and said, "Can you guide me to the audience chamber?" "Huh? It's not difficult, but please." Since spirits were not visible, neither were their energies. Dia took a big stride to step into the darkness. With her to lead me, I placed my hand on her shoulder and followed. However, she noticed something a bit odd. Why aren't there any guards? The corridor seems empty. Upon realizing this, Dia and Darius commented. The place was completely dark, and with me knowing nothing about my surroundings, I couldn't help but remain silent, pondering the reason. I was unable to come up with a clear answer. Like this, we smoothly arrived at the audience chamber. Feeling the door's texture with my palm, I took a deep breath and turned to stare at the two. There was no need to ask if they were ready. From the left, I could feel a strong wind from Darius' breath, while from the right, I could smell Dia's cool fragrance. Creak. Thus, without any hesitation, I opened the door. Unlike outside, the audience chamber was not filled with darkness. However, the reason could be easily understood. Countless people knelt and respectfully bowed towards the throne. Not only the guards, but numerous servants working in the royal palace also formed a queue. Additionally, people living in the accommodations provided for employees working in the palace were also present. Well, what's going on? Hearing Dia's gasp, I directed my attention ahead. The carpet, once red, had now taken on a hazy, deep midnight blue hue as it extended towards a massive throne. The man seated on the throne was the king under a curse. A sinister creature with a grim face and small horns on its head possessed the king's body and hovered behind him. This was another type of possession. You can see me?" The grim-faced creature, immediately realizing I could see its true form, turned towards me and asked. After signaling the two to step back, I walked on the carpet. "Yes, I can clearly see your demon-like figure." Thinking that it was ridiculous, the evil spirit sneered mockingly. "A demon-like figure? How foolish. I am a demona transcendent being with immortality beyond human limits. Stop bluffing. If anything, you're probably in the process of becoming a demon." Perhaps I perfectly hit a sore spot. The grim-faced creature momentarily fell silent. "How many souls have you devoured for horns to grow on an ordinary human's head? According to my knowledge, this is beyond common sense. I have been doing this for no less than centuries. What can a mere necromancer like you, a criminal, possibly know? It was a monster that devoured the souls of deceased humans, and thus aimed to transcend beyond humanity." That creature gestured with its chin towards the dark spiritualist, who was standing behind me, and laughed. "That bitch is quite impressive. You'll make excellent nourishment." As a necromancer, the dark spiritualist was also aware of how extraordinary the entity before us was. However, she could only remain silent in its presence. Even a formidable necromancer like the dark spiritualist dared not compare. The power gap between them was clearly evident. It was so powerful. This being had obviously possessed enough strength to engulf Griffin Kingdom. It had surpassed the norms of being just an evil spirit, an evil ghost. And currently, I was staring at something in the process of becoming more. The process of becoming a demon. How ridiculous. A sneer involuntarily appeared on my lips. "The bearer of Lemegeton, do you believe in that mere stone?" The creature opened its mouth as if he was about to devour something, but he immediately laughed. Lemegeton's owner was originally a demon, but he gave the stone to a boy who wished to save his mother, as both a blessing and a curse. "Now I shall take it. It is indeed such a sweet fruit." The Lemegeton in my hand resonated. I raised my hand to look at it and replied, "Did you get blinded by a mere stone like this?" Necromancers are those closest to death, yet they have never reached that level. The boundary line between life and death. They were those who listened to the stories of both sides from the closest point to the line. However, the line was not horizontal but vertical. The dead are just that, dead. Do not dare to so casually invade the realm of the living. The grim-faced creature began to mockingly laugh at my words as if they were utterly ridiculous. Are you currently teaching me black magic? Are you trying to tell me how to perform necromancy? I have now become the demon of Griffin. In my past life, I was a mage who shook the continent, diving into the very extremity of taboo. That was a meaningless power. Despite confidently declaring its achievements, the creature suddenly seemed pathetic. This was a lifetime of ignorance, stemming from its inability to grasp the essence of the study he had pursued even beyond death. You're talking about immortality, right? Did you forsake your humanity in order to become a demon? You're just a third-rate coward who only knows how to run away, unable to grasp the meaning, intention, and weight of death. Blaze, a damned piece of fodder who denies death, even while in companionship with the dead. Blue flames blazed from my hand. I felt like I could already see the end of this battle. He fled from death, and shed its guise as a human, thus fully transforming into an evil ghost. Learn from this, you, a moron who has failed to realize anything amidst countless deaths you've witnessed. If a lesson would be the only thing he could take from me, a bastard like you doesn't deserve to rest in peace. Absolute extinction was the only thing I had prepared for. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 68. A third-rate necromancer. Chapter 68. A third-rate necromancer. A third-rate necromancer. You, damn bastard who considers himself to be a tiger despite never having seen one. The grim-faced creature snickered. Orpheus' body began to move as the evil ghost called Griffin cackled. You morons, protect the king. Then evil ghost Griffin began to speak through Orpheus' mouth. The moment he issued the command, numerous servants immediately stood up and rushed forward. However, my mana surged and pushed them away. It was a type of black magic I had learned from the dark spiritualist that didn't involve the manipulation of souls. Patterns made from mana flickered under my feet. This was one of the few defensive spells a necromancer could use to avoid being possessed by powerful evil spirits. Usually, it wouldn't have any effect on normal servants. However, as they were influenced by the evil ghost's power, they couldn't approach me as they wished. Dia, stay behind me. Sorry, but I cannot allow myself to be controlled. Bang, bang. The servants were also rushing towards Darius and Dia near the entrance, and not just me. Darius thrust his sword back into its scabbard and swung it around like a club to drive them away. Dia, on the other hand, restricted their movements by firing mana bullets at their thighs and feet. Go and assist them. What? Then what about you? Surprised, the dark spiritualist stared at me with concern. But my gaze was solely focused on evil ghost Griffin and King Orpheus. I can deal with him by myself. Trust me. You're really... The dark spiritualist gave me a quick hug and whispered, "All right, you cannot die here because we still need to see what lies at the end of the journey of necromancy. This is your master's order." Despite not feeling any warmth or weight, I could feel a strange sensation of something touching me. Okay. I gave a slight nod and let her go to support Darius and Dia. How unseemly. The evil ghost possessing the king's body clicked his tongue as he watched us act like that. A threat at just this level does not call for such sentimentalities. Why the dramatics? We are not rehearsing a tragedy here, are we? It was truly such a ridiculous sight to see as he hadn't even used a fraction of the massive power he possessed. I gripped the Lemegeton, infusing mana into it, and asked, "I have one question. What? Is that a plea?" The overwhelming pressure radiating from him almost caused me to lose consciousness momentarily. If I hadn't protected myself with magic, it wouldn't have been strange if I had lost without putting up a fight. If you want an answer from me, you must at least show me that you are worthy of it. The pressure intensified. Nevertheless, I stood tall with my back straight, gripping the Lemegeton even tighter. Why did you persecute all the dark mages? The present Griffin Kingdom went beyond merely harboring a hatred for the people known as dark mages. They treated these people as the kingdom's enemies. Even though Luineth Griffin, who changed his name to Haralhazard, was the perpetrator of the diabolic massacres. The evil ghost Griffin standing before me was the one who induced this sentiment. Perhaps feeling amused at my question, the evil ghost laughed out loud. It's quite amusing. It is hilarious, isn't it? That massacre helped ensure that my position would remain secure. Given that I was the one who was seated atop the most radiant throne, perhaps no one saw it coming. That the dark mage, whom you all once scorned and pointed fingers at, was actually your own king. It was truly a masterpiece. It was such a pleasure. Due to that event, the kingdom began to strictly regulate black magic, banning all books and information about it, creating a favorable environment for me. And that led to the establishment of the current Griffin Kingdom, where everyone had become extremely ignorant about evil spirits. For instance, at the so-called Best Academy, Loburn, they couldn't even mount proper resistance during the incident caused by Setimas Angel. It was all due to the outlawing of dark mages that the kingdom knew nothing about black magic. As the pressure kept increasing, I gritted my teeth and took a deep breath. A faint light emanated from the Lemegeton, providing me with assistance. To conceal his identity, he ruthlessly took countless lives. To ensure no one recognized him, he turned the entire kingdom into ignorant fools. He did so to an unbelievable extent, but he managed to succeed nonetheless. However, surely that's not the only reason. Griffin's eyebrows twitched slightly. It was a subtle reaction, but it meant that I hit the mark. It's a throne you've managed to preserve for centuries. Yet, why did you suddenly orchestrate the massacre 200 years ago, risking such stature? It would have been easier if he had done so from the beginning. So why did he attempt to further strengthen his position for a throne he had firmly occupied for centuries by insisting on causing such a diabolic massacre all of a sudden? There was only one answer that I could think of because the need for it had emerged. It is probably because you feared that another dark mage like yourself would come into existence. 200 years ago, an outstanding dark mage happened to discover your secret and became a threat to you. That is my deduction. In other words, what he meant by strengthening his position was that he felt threatened by someone. If I may add another reason, it was because you were afraid. Even under this tremendous pressure, the corners of my mouth were slightly lifted. It wasn't intentional, but a half-instinctive action that seemed quite provocative. It was because this bastard had quite an amusing expression on his face. After listening to this, it seems that you have blabbered enough. I must admit you have a talent for making things really annoying. A dense mass of mana began to gather above the king's head. In fact, the slightest movement of this tremendous power could annihilate the entire audience chamber. Thanks to you, the kingdom's laws against dark mages will now be even more severe. And yes, you're quite similar to that annoying guy who came looking for me 200 years ago. You threatened me, the king, and due to your actions, half of the royal palace was ruined. However, I managed to miraculously survive and defeat you. The evil ghost seemed like he had come up with quite a heroic backstory this time. Did you wander around looking for the ghosts using the Lemegeton? He then let out a boisterous laugh. I could sense the light from the Lemegeton growing even more melancholic at the words of that bastard. Do you know why I watched over you so closely? It's because, in the end, you're no different from the countless other necromancers spread all over. You forcibly awaken spirits using that stone and manipulate them for your own purposes. You forcefully awaken them from their rest and use them. What? Third-rate necromancer, you said? Just like all people? Are you kidding me? In the end, you too treat the dead as mere tools. You are no different from a necromancer like me. I have no intention of wasting more of the king's time on someone who is all bark and no bite. Now perish. Evil ghost Griffin extended its hand. The mana sphere wriggled and moved. However, its form began to deteriorate almost immediately. It started swaying about, and simultaneously, agonizing screams from inside began to resound. Perplexed by the sudden change, the guy looked dumbfounded, and I shook my head in disbelief. Unfortunately, the heavy pressure pressing down on me gradually faded away. I could feel some relief in my waist that had become tense due to the pressure. Despite the lingering pain, my lips trembling and teeth clenched, it was still bearable. You can only be called third-rate because you don't even have a simple understanding of the basics. What did you say? It was a concept ID explained to Findine and Dia. Although I had never properly conducted a lecture for the students at the academy, I never expected to give one to an evil ghost who was on the brink of evolving into a demon in the royal palace. All souls contain mana. The amount may vary, but for a soul to manipulate mana, it needed intense emotions that could act as a substitute for a physical body. In other words, I pointed at the huge sphere. From inside the huge mass of mana, people's faces protruded, struggling and glowing. It means your massive mana contains a proportional amount of souls. Because he was a necromancer. Once a soul perished, their mana, too, naturally would disappear. However, for a dark mage like him to use such vast mana, that meant that there were resting souls inside that evil ghost, which meant that there was a chance for me to absorb them. Lemegeton could awaken those resting souls. Just by emitting light, it already began awakening the resting souls within the evil ghost. Those whose souls were captured by the evil ghost had their consciousness restored. It's truly ironic. 2 months ago, when I met Emily, defeated the human bone centipede, and made it possible for her to get her revenge on the research director, Malchus, I had one question. The way a soul attained rest and was exterminated seemed to have strictly different principles. When a person died, they would close their eyes, and their soul would return to the earth. Meanwhile, extermination meant the complete disappearance of the soul itself. Since this was an extremely challenging task, it was impossible to do it with my magic at that time. However, Emily managed to annihilate the research director, Malchus, by herself while they were underground. It was clearly impossible with my magic alone. However, it was evident to me since I was the one who converted Emily's mana into magic. In the end, I reached a conclusion. Emily's resentment amplified my magic even further. The desire for revenge granted the girl a power close to an unimaginable level. That, too, was due to the emotions the girl had developed after her death. Ultimately, even the deceased possess a will. They harbor emotions. It is a notion that is the exact opposite of the causality we have common understanding of. It wasn't just that they died with resentment. Resentment could also arise after death. Gra, save me. It's a demon. A cursed demon. Freedom. Give me rest. It's better to just annihilate me. The souls that he had imprisoned for hundreds of years, using their mana as he wished while they were unconscious, had now awakened. And now they harbored a deep and intense grudge towards the evil ghost. Evil ghost Griffin tried to capture the souls that were trying to escape by any means. Necromancers were originally proficient in capturing souls and inflicting pain as they carried out their duties. However, the Lemegeton emitted even brighter light. Due to the nature of this stone, which imparted the ideal power necessary to awaken souls, the evil ghost seemed to have a hard time now. Necromancers merely borrow their power from the dead. This was something I said when I first met King Orpheus in the prison. Perhaps because you have become an evil ghost. I sneered at the bastard who was struggling. Or perhaps because you forgot that these souls were once human. What was the point of being able to handle various techniques and advanced magic? While you borrow their power. If the roots supporting everything from below were weak, it would eventually result in only fragile branches. You forgot to respect and appreciate their greatness. And those who lack such basics, we called them. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 69. The King of Griffin. Chapter 69. The King of Griffin. The King of Griffin. Greya. I will kill you. I will kill you. Why won't you let us go? I said I want to stop. I just want to close my eyes now. Wow. Those souls finally broke free. After gaining self-consciousness, they showed anger and the desire to unleash their grudges. The souls that were pouring out from the evil ghost had turned into projectiles, one after another. Since the evil ghost had turned the mana contained in the souls and used them as magic, the souls spewed out like a whirlwind, unable to endure their anger, and started striking everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. It had become an uncontrollable force. Not only did they attack the evil ghost, but they also collided with pillars, ceilings, walls, and lights all over the audience chamber, as if they were trying to harm themselves. My protective magic couldn't completely block these many spirits' rampage. Additionally, stopping Lemegeton, which was activating and amplifying them, was not an option. I was almost certain that the evil ghost would once again devour the souls if I stopped it. I lowered my body. Even though I would inevitably suffer damage as well, it was something I must endure since the evil ghost was taking the brunt of the soul's wrath. The damage was more severe for him. Glancing behind, Dia and Darius were also caught in the rampage of souls, forced into a defensive state. It wouldn't be unexpected for them to be overwhelmed in no time. Although the dark spiritualist was protecting them, however, being a ghost, there were limitations on what she could do. The servants who rushed towards us were all lying unconscious on the floor, and some were being swept away by the rampage of the souls. Since I couldn't save everyone, I retreated for a moment, joining the two while keeping a distance from the evil ghost. Is it over? Dia was the one who asked first. I shook my head and placed both of them within the protective range of my magic. It's not over yet. I just released the souls concentrated inside him. I have not completely annihilated him. Annihilating the evil ghost wouldn't occur with such ease, and just because the souls escaped didn't mean he would suddenly become an ordinary ghost. While his original power remained intact, it meant that I had eliminated his cheat-like power, making dealing with him several times easier. Seriously, when will this end? I had no answer to Darius' question. The amount of souls consumed by the evil ghost for hundreds of years was far beyond imagination. This meant that their grudges were deeply rooted. Is there nothing you can do about it? The souls were strengthened by Lemegeton, which was emitting a faint light. However, it seemed like I somehow needed to stop the rampage immediately. The momentum was such that it could potentially destroy the royal palace if not handled carefully. What will you do? At the dark spiritualist's question, I turned my gaze back to the evil ghost and replied, "We don't have time to wait. This place will be ruined before we can do anything about it. If this place were just an empty field or a desolate plain, I would have waited. In fact, waiting alone could already lead to the evil ghost's power eventually dissipating completely, and the current situation would turn somewhat manageable. However, because the rampage of the souls happening right now was too intense, there was a high likelihood of casualties among the servants. The royal palace was also in a mess. Fortunately, the evil ghost had become much weaker than before and was currently distracted by the souls escaping. Dark spiritualist, you should stay here and guard Dia. Darius is coming with me. 2M going too. Dia replied stubbornly, but I shook my head and discouraged her to follow. Guard that box well and use it when I give you the signal. Dia seemed to want to ask what was in the box she was carrying, but she didn't insist. She only tightly gripped her gun, and though she wasn't entirely convinced yet, she chose to follow my words as they were. Stand behind me. Darius and I lowered our body and moved forward together. I considered casting a spell to protect us, but Darius unexpectedly took the lead instead. No, you stay behind me. Currently, you're the only one who can defeat the evil ghost that has taken possession of His Majesty's body. Dais. So, conserve your power. It was indeed a valid opinion. I never expected Darius to step forward and offer himself as a shield. Dais. While cautiously moving forward like this, Darius suddenly spoke. Even though I didn't bother to reply, he continued speaking. I never imagined a future like this would happen to us. I only aimed to follow our father's footsteps and keep the family safe. But I actually didn't fully grasp what this family truly was. I slightly turned my head and met Darius' eyes. This was the first time I considered him reliable. I don't know what father thought of you, but to me you are part of the Verdi household, and you are my family. So if I die here, give me that stone. Kung. Realizing that we were approaching him, the evil ghost started to launch a counterattack. Instead of trying to stop the souls who were escaping like water flowing from a leaky jar, his strategy was to eliminate me and seize Lemegeton. Black hands emerged from the ground and attacked us from every direction. Darius drew his sword and skillfully cut through them. Then he continued speaking. You should be the next head of the Verdi household. Thunk. He was a remarkably skilled martial artist. He only looked inferior because the opponents he faced were unbelievably powerful. Unfortunately, this time was no exception. In a battle with a necromancer who had lived for at least centuries, he couldn't swing his sword more than a few times before dropping to one knee. Stay still and wait here. I pressed his shoulder firmly before stepping forward. Don't leave such useless last words. Are you planning to close your eyes after being satisfied with just escaping father's shadow? I used my magic to protect Darius. After getting a bit of relief from the situation, he glanced at me and then stood up with a spirited smile. That's right, you're too skinny to protect the northern barrier. He tightly gripped his sword again. He stepped in front of me, saying it again. I will protect you no matter what it takes. Forget everything else. Just concentrate on dealing with that unholy creature. All right. I took out Lemegeton once again. I couldn't win by using magic. After all, that body belonged to King Orpheus, and I couldn't harm it recklessly. Now, what I needed to do was, ironically, awaken the souls even more intensely, because the most important person was still asleep inside. In the game, there were only two possible outcomes after King Orpheus discovered the truth. Either become completely broken or finally manage to overcome it. But now I understood. It wasn't that King Orpheus managed to overcome the truth. Instead, the evil ghost took over his body. That was why he could easily overlook this matter. On the contrary, what was broken was Orpheus' conviction. It was shattered because it was too rigid and upright. I wouldn't let such an ending happen this time. No, I would make sure it would never happen. With Lemegeton, which was emitting even brighter light, I spoke. Your Majesty, can you hear me? It felt like being in a mud pit. On top of that, there was a sensation that a bunch of germs and insects were crawling all over his body. It was uncomfortable and disgusting. He couldn't open his eyes, nor could he smell anything. He couldn't even widen his mouth. He once heard that people would experience a rest similar to sleep after death. Could this be what they call eternal rest? While experiencing a sensation akin to torture, King Orpheus sensed a faint voice tickling his ears. It was a calm but firm voice with self-assurance. However, even though he heard the voice, no thoughts reached him. It was a familiar tone, yet he couldn't recall who it was. In a situation akin to the moments before a slumber, Orpheus slowly tried to relax his eyes. Tuck. He felt someone grabbing his shoulder. On top of that, it wasn't just one. In an instant, hands clinging all over his body urgently yet gently woke him up. Huh? He slowly opened his eyes. Unable to move his body enough to look around, he didn't know who was holding him, but the voice became clearer. Your Majesty, it is almost time already. The Deus? It was undoubtedly Deus Virtus' voice. Yet, he couldn't tell where it was coming from. But strength gradually returned to his body as Deus' voice echoed. Now, we only need you to gather your determination and wake up, Your Majesty. Then, you can eradicate this great evil that has entrenched the Griffin dynasty for centuries. Me? Gather my determination? What kind of determination was he talking about? Your Majesty must have witnessed countless atrocities committed by the Griffin dynasty. Right? From the records kept in the basement, he had witnessed all the atrocious deeds the Griffin dynasty committed, to the point of abomination. Even though those deeds were carried out by someone who was possessed by the evil ghost, in the end, that very evil ghost was also one of Griffin's ancestors. You must have thought you did not have such qualifications to do so, and you suffered from thinking you were not the one meant to sit on the throne. That was right. He could only restrain the urge to seize the crown, throw it away, and escape to a distant land. But, Your Majesty, being unqualified and having no responsibilities are different. To simply say that you are also a victim, the burden you bear is too big. A king should lead and take responsibility instead of making excuses and running away. Yet you are not wrong either. The Griffin dynasty indeed has already lost its qualification to stand as the son of this kingdom. Incompetence is a sin for those in the king's position. He understood the meaning of those sharp words, and Orpheus thought he might be shedding tears. However, Your Majesty, should you not take responsibility? Should you not restore this kingdom, which has become a deformed constitution, to its original state? That is right. You have made mistakes, so you want to step down from the throne? Does that not make you someone who is no different from merely indulging in their own desires? Someone who merely flees when things become challenging? Perhaps by now Deus too was wearing a mocking smile, because in the end he had one thing to say. Hence, please embrace all the responsibility and return to your throne. It is time to rise, Your Majesty. His thoughts raced back. It felt as if someone were pulling him up from beneath the water. In a consciousness that seemed to twist his hips and drag him down, he turned his head towards the ones who had hauled him above, higher and higher, the owners of the hands that shook him, thus waking him up. Some faces were familiar and some were not. It seemed like he knew who they were. Father, mother. The late king offered Lydon Griffin, who had been devoured by the evil ghost a long time ago, and his mother, Hylan Lydon Griffin. Not only them, but also the numerous owners of the Griffin dynasty who had been devoured by the evil ghost and had their bodies taken away. So is this why you wished for me to stay foolish? Now, King Orpheus realized the true meaning of his father's last words. Remain foolish. Did you wish that I would not find out the truth? Squeeze. Power emerged in his clenched fist as the burning desire in his chest spread throughout his body. Did you wish for me not to know about Griffin's miserable state? He felt a palm full of wrinkles on his back. Realizing it was his father's, Orpheus shed hot tears. I thought you had gone far away. You were a father I had always respected. But, now, father, I can see your back, which has always felt so distant. He could feel a gentle push on his back. Now, right now. He would break free from the evil ghost's clutches that had been oppressing the royal family, the long and enduring chains from which no one from the Griffin dynasty had managed to escape. I shall surpass you, soon. The partially ruined audience chamber appeared in front of him, and Deus Verdi smiled with a look of unwavering faith. Gasp, gasp. With a rough breath, King Orpheus, while clutching his chest, descended from the throne, fell on his knees and writhed in agony. I immediately retracted Lemegeton's light, and the ghosts who seemed to be partying wildly gradually quieted down. Is it working? Darius, barely holding on amidst the evil ghost's attack, was already covered in wounds, with blood pooling beneath his feet. Although he needed treatment, the battle was not over yet. Graea, separated from King Orpheus, the evil ghost writhed and his remaining mana started to disperse. Now, the evil ghost was just thrashing instinctively. Amidst a sensation as if thorns were flying towards me, I reached out my hand. Through mana, the embodiment of the souls from the surroundings appeared. It was a magic I used to subdue the evil spirits in the Verdi mansion. Necromancers used this method to completely subjugate evil spirits as their own, surrounding their souls with spirits from their surroundings. It turns out you're insane. Thinking that I intended to subjugate him, the evil ghost rushed forward with his mouth wide open. Just like that, the grim-looking head swallowed me whole, and soon, control of my body began to shift. Kurk, in the end, you are just like any other necromancer. How dare you try to make me yours? You're insane. How dare you think you can? It was just like when the original Deus possessed me. The evil ghost also started to take over my body. Staggering, I fell on one knee, but simultaneously, I looked at a woman in the distance. My quick-witted younger sister immediately opened the box on her back. Huh? Following Dia's exclamation of disbelief, light radiated throughout the dark audience chamber. Just by its presence, the evil spirits would flee, and ghosts would close their eyes. Lemegeton was a cheat-like item for necromancy. However, the game didn't simply grant an overwhelmingly powerful weapon unilaterally. Meanwhile, that thing was not merely the antithesis of the Lemegeton, but a gift from God that purified all wicked things. It was the most perfect object among all others on the continent. A silver chalice that could contain everything in the world. Dia was surprised when she pulled the Holy Grail from the box, but I shouted while struggling for control against the evil ghost. Now is the time. You're insane. Now the situation had reversed. In contrast to before, I seized the evil ghost attempting to escape from my body. Knowing that he would try to escape the moment he saw the Holy Grail, I needed a form of restraint to secure him. I had now assigned myself to that role. Holding the Holy Grail in one hand and a magic gun in the other, Dia aimed at me without hesitation. In those eyes, it wasn't resentment that was directed at me, her second older brother instead. It held trust. The holy power emanating from the Holy Grail blended with Dia's mana and traveled through her hand, and onto the gun's muzzle. Are you borrowing the power of God? Are you not Ashimid? As a necromancer, I snickered at his absurd last-ditch effort. I am different from you, one who became an evil ghost and unable to receive God's blessings. Tang. The muzzle spewed flames, and a bullet filled with holy power flew straight towards me. The dead should remain dead. Push. The bullet precisely struck my left shoulder. I immediately dropped Lemigitin due to the holy power coursing my whole body. Greira. Touched by holy power, the evil ghost let out a scream and began to succumb to God's judgment. The smile on my lips did not fade, even when I felt the intense pain in my shoulder. It was a mistake to think I would let you possess me. Even after my clear explanation, he remained the kind of student unaffected by an important lesson. What I have prepared for you was only annihilation. I looked up at the sky, clutching my throbbing shoulder. Sunlight streamed in through the holes in the audience chamber, riddled throughout. As the late dawn departed, and the sunlight gently descended, the Phantom of Griffin had achieved a total, a complete, a perfect annihilation. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 70. Nighttime Toasts Beneath the Moon 1. Chapter 70. Nighttime Toasts Beneath the Moon 1. Nighttime Toasts Beneath the Moon 1. Gah. The moon is a real killer tonight, isn't it? Even though he was severely injured and wrapped in bandages all over his body, Darius laughed heartily as he admired the moon. The moon looked as if it were sliced into neat halves, and as reinvigorating as it was, the moonlight seemed to carry a tinge of melancholy as it gently bathed the surroundings. Thud. Darius, who had been idly sitting atop an oak barrel, stood up. Amidst the picturesque night scenery of the garden, he chose to tip the wine glass tonight. I did entertain the idea of getting drunk with some snacks while enjoying the moon after getting out of prison, but I never expected the opportunity to do so would arrive this quickly. Once the Phantom of Griffin was annihilated, King Orpheus regained control of his body. He stopped the royal knights and the mage tribunal judges while acknowledging that he was possessed by the evil ghost. And just like that, the incident was resolved. For some reason, a nighttime drinking fest was held at the royal palace garden a few days later. I wondered if it was necessary to do it now, but the king suggested that as the audience chamber would be under repairs either way, there would be no better time than now. That's how we ended up gathering like this. Being sturdy is good and all, but I never knew she would be that sturdy. Dia was moving a cart full of wine glasses beside me. I wanted to help, but I couldn't move my arm easily due to the gunshot wound on my left shoulder. Gaha. Dia, bring on the drinks. And there was Findine walking right past me. She was still dressed in her maid uniform, somehow looking like a child while raising and swinging the largest mug excitedly. Chief, wait for me. It's a party. The scrapyard nomads trio trailed behind Findine like ducklings. Seeing their enthusiasm, which seemed like they had already downed a few drinks, Dia warned them. Hey, it's already quite late, so keep it down. Since there were no servants around, and it was a small space just for us, causing a fuss might disturb those resting. The servants had only arranged a campfire-like setup before retreating to rest, while Archmage Ropelican and his apprentices gathered to kindle the flame. It seemed like they were betting on who could use the least amount of mana to conjure fire. I took a seat on the bench in front of the flower bed where Eleanor and I often sat. The massive pillar of fire, conjured by Ropelican, shot up sporadically like a geyser, lighting up the sky. Oh, that's way too much firepower. Master, what should we do? Wait. The mages were putting on quite a show. Wow. They'll just go take a look around for a moment, perhaps impressed by the massive fire bursting gloriously. The dark spiritualist naturally drifted towards the mages. As I was absent-mindedly enjoying the fire while propping my chin, a female student sat next to me. Aria Rias handed over the beer mug she was holding to me. Professor, you should have a drink as well. I warned her as I accepted it. Do not think about drinking, you are still a student. When I warned her sternly, Aria smiled mischievously and extended the glass in her other hand. The scent of oranges hit my nose. I'm just having some juice. You really dislike it when students do things unlike students, don't you? I didn't bother replying with because I am a professor because I hardly had any proper experience working as a professor. Aria gently laughed and asked as I was blankly staring at the fire. Are you spacing out to the fire? You mentioned it a long time ago, Professor. A really long time ago. Was she talking about something from the first cycle? I gulped down my drink without bothering to reply. Though it was a beer mug, it was filled with wine that tasted quite pleasant, most likely provided by the royal palace. So what are you going to do from now on? Oh, don't worry. Whatever you decide on, I'm on your side, Professor. No matter what I do. As I brought the drink to my lips again and inquired, Arya responded without a hint of hesitation. Yes, of course. I held the mug close to my lips and momentarily contemplated before lowering my hand and asking again. What if I were to massacre most of the kingdom like Hazard? I thought she would hesitate a bit, or she would at least pretend to question it. Yes. However, Arya answered with a bright smile, without a moment's hesitation. You must have a reason behind it. Whether she realized it or not, her response just now had pricked my heart. She was the character I used to play with. From her first steps till the conclusion of the story, I had fought alongside her and witnessed it all. Watching Arya Rias, the protagonist, being this broken was more difficult than I imagined. Huff, tap. With my gaze fixed on the flames, I slowly extended my hand and placed it on Arya's head. I could feel that Arya was surprised and was staring blankly at me, but I didn't want to look at her right now. However, I felt sorry for her. It must have been difficult. I offered whatever comfort I could. While I may not be able to fully empathize with the extent of her suffering and agony that made her reach her breaking point, I could somewhat understand it. Everything will be fine. Relax your shoulders. Ah, Professor. She was about to reach out and hug me, but I had already withdrawn my hand from her head, pushing her away as she tried to get closer to me. Not this. I can't do this? Genuinely disappointed, Arya clicked her tongue and murmured while carefully adjusting her but to move closer to me. Our thighs were touching, signifying the current proximity between us. It was annoying, but seeing how Arya liked it so much, I didn't feel like making an issue out of it. Arya smiled in satisfaction as she seemed to enjoy the atmosphere. However, a certain freedom-seeking barbarian abruptly appeared and ruined the mood. Turns out when you drink, you enjoy doing it alone, Master Bastard. Miss Findenay, we're having an important conversation right now, so could you please scram? Arya delivered a sharp remark, but Findenay responded with a smirk. Is smelling Master Bastard's scent that important? Master Bastard, you too must have noticed that, but you just pretend not to. Pardon? Arya's head turned like a rusty gear. With her face flushed, exhibiting a rare moment of embarrassment, she looked directly at me and asked, "Did you notice it?" If she was talking about her getting closer to me intentionally, pretending to breathe while trying to smell my scent, yes. I knew it. Upon hearing that, Arya stood up abruptly, lowered her head deeply to hide her face, and stormed away. Findenay then occupied Arya's seat. Casually leaning on the bench, holding a beer mug in the other hand, and resting one leg on the opposite thigh, Findenay adopted a posture that was inappropriate while wearing a skirt. Keep your legs down. I immediately furrowed my brows and warned her. But Findenay provoked me even more with her remarks. Why? Does it excite you? Does it bring back memories of your old libertine days? Shall we make tonight lively? Do not cross the line. TSK, don't people joke around when they drink? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Findenay extended her mug towards me. Letting out a sigh, I reciprocated by gently clinking my mug against hers. It was more of a thud than a clink. Satisfied with that, Findenay gulped down her drink, and I, too, took a sip once again. Will you be staying in Grey Pond for a while? When Findenay asked casually, I calmly responded. Yes, it is not over yet. I had overcome all the trials from the king. So, the only thing left was for me to be officially recognized as a dark mage affiliated with the kingdom. However, in reality, this was just the beginning. I could already vividly picture the torrent of criticism pouring in and how I would be dragged to the debate hall. It will not just be noisy. Many mercenaries will be aiming to assassinate or kidnap me. When the time comes, you will have to deal with them, because I had planned to have Arya return to the academy. Hearing this, Findenay rummaged through her pockets. Assassins? It will be so much fun. Will I need to swing my axe every 3 days? Findenay pulled out a cigarette from her pocket. As I stared at her patiently, she immediately mumbled an excuse upon realizing my scrutiny. It's a habit. I'll just keep it in my mouth. Huff. Anyway, regardless of the situation, Findenay would still be herself. Even though she was feeling tipsy and had a flushed face, she still casually broached a serious topic. That's perfect timing. I've heard that some of our fellow countrymen are in Grey Pond, though it's a different resistance group, not the scrapyard nomads. I want to go and meet up with them. It seems like I should gather information as well. I silently listened to the topic she brought up as if she was trying to remind me and make sure I did not forget that they were part of the resistance movement. Certainly, there were other resistance groups that had come from the Clark Republic, and they were not only dwelling in Grey Pond, but also in several other major cities. They had different names and proclaimed convictions. They emerged as major villains in the chapter where Findinay and the protagonist Arya fought, and Findinay, who unified all the resistance groups, took on the role of the leader. Of course, such storylines no longer exist. Such a future disappeared the moment Findinay became my maid. Therefore, Arya probably wouldn't want to mess with Findinay for no reason, either. In the midst of a rather serious conversation, Findinay glanced at me. "Master Bastard, can I ask you one thing?" "Speak." Affected by her serious expression, I unintentionally focused on what she wanted to say. "Back then, when I offered to lick your asshole, did you regret rejecting it?" "You regret it, right? Right?" Findinay. My head was pounding. Since I was definitely not drunk, I naturally responded with an expression full of disgust. "Get lost."